the fire department to come and discuss the changes to the 911 response protocol. If you all could please come up.
You want the administration only? You have both sides. So you have both sides. So you want the administration only?
The administration on this one. Member Ayers, before we get started.
Yep, thank you. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So let me start here because I brought this discussion to this table. And before you start your PowerPoint and all of that, the reason that we're even at this table having this discussion is because you weren't at a table having a discussion comprehensively. And that is the part that I have a full fundamental issue with. You all have a joint health and safety committee within your department, and this was not talked about with that committee. It wasn't talked about with the union. So I don't understand how we have to end up here to have effective communication. And so, Commissioner Jones, I know, you had said in the paper that no one from council called you, and you're right, I didn't. I didn't call you. I didn't invite you to the table, but that's because I don't have to. So that's that part. But more importantly, we've had discussions over the years just about making sure that communication is happening. And so I have an issue if you can go to the paper and say that no one communicated with you, but the reason that we're here is because nobody's communicating. It's simple as that. And so if before you start this, if we can just talk about that piece, because I think that's the nexus of everything.
Before we do anything, I'd like for you all to introduce yourselves and who you represent for the record.
Derek Hillman, Director of Special Projects with the Fire Department.
I'm Robert Chinsky. I'm the Deputy Chief of Administration. I've been with the department for 32 and a half years. I was a DFFA official for 16 years before taking this job. I was the treasurer for 6 of those 16 years.
Eric Jones, Fire Commissioner.
I'm Robert Distelrath, Chief of Fire Operations. I've been serving the Detroit Fire Department and citizens of this city for 34 and a half years.
All right. If you would please respond to the member's question.
Sure. Through the chair, Member Ayers, we've had a great relationship, and I hope to continue that relationship. I've had conversation with the DFFA. I've had conversations with them on numerous topics. I did speak to President Nevin about this policy, and at some point, I had to move forward with protecting the citizens and the Detroit firefighters, and that's what I did.
My question, though, was not just about DFFA. My question specifically said the Joint Health and Safety Committee.
So the Joint Health and Safety Committee has members from the union and the administration. We have met. There's been some communication miscues with the Joint Health and Safety Committee, and we haven't met as often as I would have liked. I've addressed those issues, and I don't see having those issues moving forward.
Right, but my question, again, is did we come to the Joint Health and Safety Committee that obviously is a conglomeration of everybody, rank and file and the whole nine? Did we discuss a change in the policy with that committee?
We did not discuss the incident response policy, to my knowledge, with the Joint Health and Safety Committee. However, I did, Commissioner to the president of the DFFA, with the union president, Mike Nevin, have a conversation about it. So not all of the policy changes that occur go to the Joint Health and Safety Committee.
And so, and just to set the backdrop, though, for anybody that's listening and whatnot, again, we have a good relationship, and we will have a good relationship. And like I told you when you first got this, actually before you got this position, that there will be things that we disagree with, because at the end of the day, neither one of us have ever been a firefighter. And so with that, that's why I make sure that I listen to the people in your department, and I listen to all of them and take it all in, and then recognizing that there is 1, 2, and really 3 sides to everything, and you know that. But my concern is when we change policy from any situation, we change policy, one, it has to be one that makes sense. Two, it has to be notified to people so that they understand, because something like this, you have people, let's take, for example, I don't know, Engine 30, right in the neighborhood. Folks that work at Engine 30 live in that neighborhood. And I understand that it may be dispatched as priority 2, which means, no, you don't need all the lights and the sirens. We got that. But if I live in that neighborhood, then I might just use my own discretion and say we're going to put on lights and sirens. And that's going to happen. But what happens if I'm the person that's senior on the job, and then I have an FEO, which is a fire engine operator, the driver, that says, well, the policy says that I don't have to put on lights and sirens. Now we create a contentious situation between the person that is the senior and then the driver. I feel like this could create more issues than it's actually resolving. And so I get that you have your reasoning behind certain things, but there's a lot that can come from this. And if it got into the wrong person's hands, the narrative of this could definitely be swayed in a different manner.
So through the chair, the policy addresses discretion. Code 2 does not mean take your time. It means respond immediately. But it does mean the use of lights and sirens aren't warranted for this particular run. It means that you should respond expeditiously. It means that, however, you should not disregard traffic control devices. You should not drive left of center. And what we want to prevent is creating an emergency while responding to an emergency. Because if we never get there, we won't be able to address the emergency.
So, serving on internal operations before this council session, obviously we saw all of the lawsuits and the incidents that happened. What we didn't see in there is a high number of issues when it comes to vehicular issues with the fire department. You guys are actually on the lowest end of any incidents. And so to say that we're doing this policy because we don't want to have accidents and nobody wants to have an accident, but it's not like you all are leading the pack on that. It's actually DDOT. And then way underneath them is DPD. And then way underneath them is DFD.
So through the chair.
So let's do this. We're in a back and forth now. Let's have our presentation, and these are questions that can be answered once we go through that and during our Q&A period. That way we can educate everybody on how this policy actually impacts the issues that you're bringing up right now, Member Ayers. Let's go through our presentation.
So good morning, Chairman Benson, Member Ayers, Member McAllister. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to speak with you about the Detroit Fire Department's response policy. I love Detroit. I grew up here, and I spent my adult life serving and protecting this city during my 25-year career with the Detroit Police Department. I continue this service now in a leadership role with the Detroit Fire Department. I care deeply about the safety of our citizens and firefighters. The purpose of this policy is to protect the citizens of Detroit and Detroit firefighters, because every time that fire rig leaves the firehouse with lights and sirens, there's a risk. And we want to make sure that we are only taking that risk when property and lives are in danger. We want to make sure that everything we do is designed to protect the citizens of this city and our firefighters. When my leadership team, made up of lifelong firefighters, came to me with this policy, I decided it was worth looking at. And after reviewing policies across the country, I decided it was worth implementing because, again, safety is our #1 concern. I now want to turn it over to Chief Robert Distelrath. Chief Distelrath is the chief of our fire operations, and I'll let him walk through more in depth the reasons and the benefits of this policy.
Good morning. Through the chair, sir. What we're looking at here is an incident from 2017. This is the case of a 17-year-old driver that broadsided ladder 6 en route to an incident that resulted in injury to a firefighter. It turned out to be a small garbage fire. This is exactly the type of incident that we're trying to avoid. The fire department has professional and competent drivers operating all of our apparatus, but anytime an apparatus hits the streets, it's dangerous, whether we're responding lights and sirens or not. Here's a case where we had lights and sirens on, and driver drove straight into the rig.
Okay, so before I became deputy chief, like I said, I was at the union. I spent 20 years, over 20 years, dedicating my career toward the safety of firefighters, and now I'm expanding that to more with the safety of citizens, but I get to still concentrate on firefighters and citizen safety. We're in the safety business. My dad was a firefighter in Detroit. My uncle was a firefighter in Detroit. I have relatives on Central and Michigan. I grew up on Lamfair and Tireman. Firefighter safety is in my blood. Citizen safety is in my blood. City of Detroit's in my blood. I care deeply about what we're doing, and these kind of decisions do not come about easily. It took a lot of work, a lot of deliberation to decide how we were going to move forward to keeping our citizens and our firefighters safe. It can be an intimidating, very intimidating and scary thing for a fire truck when it's barreling down the street. We've all had that. Everybody has had to get out of the way of some kind of an emergency vehicle coming down the street. We've all experienced that. It can be an intimidating thing. We've caused accidents that we know we've caused accidents behind us, and we weren't even involved in them. So these trucks, they weigh between 30,000 and 60,000 pounds. And you cannot stop on a dime. You cannot make quick turns. In 2009, I was in charge as Lieutenant at Ladder 13. Ladder 13's on Lafayette and Lawndale. We had a run. We were coming down Lawndale. We were going to make a right turn on Verna. The driver was he was doing his thing. We were moving pretty quickly. I remember yelling, "Slow down!" It was obvious we were not going to make that turn. As we made the turn, there was a woman walking down the sidewalk with a stroller and another kid. Okay, I thought we were going to kill him. I thought somebody was going to get hurt that day. He made a right turn. We didn't hit them. We did not go into the buildings. We ended up hitting a car at a light, a red car at a light. We sent 3 people to the hospital that day. None of us got hurt, thank God, but three citizens went to the hospital. We're in the safety business. My job, our job is to help people. And if we don't get there, we can't help anybody. And if we don't get there, we're actually hurting people. I don't want to hurt people. I want to help them. In fact, 30,000 crashes a year nationwide. 30,000 crashes a year nationwide involve fire trucks. That's a lot. In 2007, we lost a brother. We lost Joe Torkos. We had another person, Walt Griscoe, put on a duty disability. They got in an accident on the way to a run, and one was killed, and one was injured and can't work anymore. It's our job to ensure that doesn't happen again. It's our responsibility. We take that very seriously. In the last 10 years, over 10% of all on-duty firefighter fatalities, 10% of them, have been attributed to vehicle accidents. This is a serious thing, and it's something that we decided as a administrative team, as a firefighter leadership, that we had to address.
So through the chair, the department's job is safety. The number one criterion in making our decisions is the safety of citizens, the safety of firefighters. It's a dangerous proposition to respond with lights and sirens. About half of all the requests for fire-related incidents are non-life-threatening situations. By using this coded response, we're reducing the use of lights and sirens. And it's making the city safer for the citizens and the firefighters.
So as I said, this isn't something we take lightly. The process of writing this SOP was over a year long. We reached out to local municipalities. We reached out to other municipalities nationwide. We wanted to see what the best practices were out there, and that's what we based our decision on. We vetted this through our senior EMS and fire personnel. Again, looking at this policy, you had well over 150 years of firefighting experience in the city of Detroit that had input on this policy. When I was on letter 4, most of my time was in Southwest Detroit. I ran on letter 4, Vinewood and West Grand Boulevard, and there were a number of times where we rolled out on fire pole. There's a wire electrical emergency incident, and we go screaming over there, and we find a cat. We find a wire flickering at the top, and we're all amazed that, you know what? We didn't hurt anybody getting here. We can't believe we didn't hurt somebody getting here, and why are they sending us here like this for this? So for me, my 32 and a half years of experience and all my experiences out there fighting fires, I ran on busy companies my whole time on the job. It played heavy on why I know that this is the best policy, this is the best way to do it, this is the right thing to do. Because I hear a lot of people talking about liability, and that's a good word. It's the right word. But as fire administration, we've got to weigh risk versus benefit, risk versus reward, risk benefit. We have to run a risk benefit analysis, and the liability for us, much more liability in getting there rather than when we got there. Our liability is racing through the streets, and we wanted to find a way to reduce the risk. Look, we roll out on 400 to 500 runs a week, fire runs. I'm not talking about EMS here. 400 to 500 fire runs a week. 50% of those turn out to be a non-emergency situation. We're just trying to do a better job at identifying those up front. That's what we're trying to do. And we're going to keep getting better at it. We got a lot of work to do here, and we're going to keep getting better at it. It's ongoing training is involved here, and we owe that to our firefighters, and we owe that to the citizens of Detroit.
Is that it?
Up on the screen, you can see some of the major cities that have been using this policy for some time: Boston, St. Louis, Miami-Dade, Phoenix. And there's a quote there from the U.S. Fire Administration Emergency Vehicle Safety Initiative. If you polled the public and asked people during which portion of a firefighter's job would that firefighter have the greatest chance of being killed, most would likely respond that this would be when firefighters are actually fighting a fire. Incidents in which firefighters are severely injured or killed while conducting tactical operations tend to draw more attention and news coverage. The truth is that firefighters are more likely to die in motor vehicle-related incident than during the course of firefighting operation.
Through the chair, so we will take any questions or concerns you have.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I never said through the chair.
All right. Any questions from Kimberly McAllister?
First, Madam.
No, you can go first.
Kimberly McAllister?
Just bear with me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Polchinski?
Shinsky.
Shinsky.
Yes, sir.
Make sure I get that. Chief, you say you have 32 years experience
Yes, sir.
as a firefighter
Yes, sir. Different ranks.
and 20 years as what, sir?
Well, I did, so for the last 32 now, I've got 2.5 as deputy chief, Before that, I was on the DFFA Executive Board for 6 years. At that time, I was a captain and lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
Before that, I was a lieutenant down in Southwest Detroit. Before that, I was a sergeant in Southwest Detroit. Before that, I was a firefighter in Southwest Detroit. Before that, I started at Engine 53. I did 2 years there at Greenfield and Finkel.
During that 20 to 32 years, sir, how many times did you come forward and say, you know, us going with these sirens and these flashing lights, it's a problem? How many times did you come before your
When I was
higher-ups and say that?
Well, when I was with the union, I was involved with the safety committee, and we talked about that, and we talked about more than that. We talked about the need to update all of our policies, and with those discussions, it was talked about, especially after Torcos died. It was strongly discussed about our incident response policy.
And what year was that, sir?
That was 2009 is when Torcos died.
2009. Okay.
7?
2007.
2007.
Okay. Now, you stated that you also have a father and an uncle that was also on the job.
Yes.
What were their feelings about sirens and oscillating lights?
Well, my uncle passed away of lung cancer, so I can't answer for him.
Okay.
But I can
my
tell you
condolences
that my
for that.
father and I have had numerous discussions about this. My dad retired from Detroit.
Yes, sir.
He became the chief of Brighton.
Yes, sir.
He's very well known in the state of Michigan as a very respected chief.
Yes, sir.
And he read our policy, and he thinks it's a good one. And we've talked numerous times about the need to slow firefighters down when they need to slow down.
Okay. He's a chief in Brighton?
No, my dad's retired now.
Oh, he's retired now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When, in 2009, when you was making that turn and you almost hit the lady and you ran into a pole,
No, we ran into a red car
red car
at a light.
at a light.
Stop.
Thank you. I'm glad we got that clarification.
Yeah.
Was lights and sirens going?
Yes.
It was going on at that time.
Yes.
And did the elderly lady, hear that and see those lights and sirens?
Sir, there was no elderly lady. There was a young lady walking with a stroller and a young child.
Oh,
They
I thought you
quickly
said so.
moved out of the way. That would have been to our left if we would have went in through the intersection into the buildings. To the right was a red car parked at a light with 3 individuals in it, and they all went to the hospital.
And you
I
said
think they
that,
were all male.
but you said she quickly moved out the way.
Oh, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. Is it Chief
Distal Wrath.
Distorat?
Yes, sir.
Chief, how many years you have on?
I'm in my 35th year.
35th year.
Mhm.
And how many times did you come before and say, you know, we need to change your career on lights and sirens?
This is, in December, I'll been chief of operations, fire
No,
operations.
sir, I understand that. But I said, in your career,
Yes,
how
sir.
many times?
I understand the question.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Could you just answer it,
So we've
please?
been working on it since then, but prior to that.
No, wait, no, stop. You've been working on it since when? Since your first year or since your 35th year?
No.
See, you're not answering my question. You're kind of like,
No.
that's why you're confusing me. Yes, sir. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay, prior to being in the administration,
Yes, sir.
I have never had any formal discussions with higher-ups about changing the policy. It has been casual conversation in the engine house of why do we do this?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Now, the example that you use, you're talking about a 17-year-old, probably just got their driver's license, has no experience as far as driving, but you use that as an example of someone that ran into one of your fire trucks. A 17-year-old. Were they drinking?
I don't believe so.
You don't
Chief-
believe? Excuse me. Were they drinking?
So, let's real quick. When a member is speaking, please allow him to finish his questions. We utilize Robert's Rules of Order here.
Sure.
So to keep order and so people aren't talking over each other, please come through the chair. Member McAllister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you don't believe so you don't really know whether that he was drinking or he was, had some type of something that could have disorientated him, or you don't really know?
I could not speak positively
Okay.
to that at this time.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Chief, how you doing?
I'm doing great, sir.
Good. Chief, as Member Ayers has stated, none of us have been firefighters. You and I have been police officers. We think about things, but is there not a response time once a call comes in that a truck must be at the location between 8 and 12 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So
through the chair,
Yes, sir.
depending on the classification of the call. So for a structure fire,
Yes, sir.
it is recommended
Yes, sir.
that all apparatus be on scene within 8 minutes.
Okay, but see, that's with this new. You're saying no, Mr. Hill?
So through the chair, no, sir. Those are NFPA guidelines, had nothing to do with our response policy. Our policy merely coded the runs from code 1 to code 2. So for lights and sirens.
Okay, just a moment. Mr. Hill,
Yes, sir.
please. No, go ahead.
Okay.
I know you
No.
want to respond.
No,
Go right ahead.
I appreciate that, sir.
It's done?
No, I can,
Okay, so it is 8 to 12 minutes prior to this that a fire truck must be on location. Prior to this new initiative or new policy that's put in, is that correct?
So the national standard,
Yes, sir.
which has been in place for years.
Yes, sir.
So the first engine due,
Yes, sir.
4 minutes. First engine with the ability to pump water, 4 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So then there's a 6-minute mark.
Yes, sir.
Then total time 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay,
Yes.
so I still added 12 minutes on that shouldn't have been added on. Okay, so therefore, I represent District 2, and some of my homes in District 2 are like hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. So therefore, if a call comes out and the 911 operator interprets this as a tier 2 or tier 3, and it's actually a tier 1, and my $1 million house burns down, then what? Now I have a home that's homeless, could be a possible liability because the engine did not get there in a reasonable time. And so that's the issues I have with that, okay? Because we've stated that, and you've corrected me. I said 8 to 12 minutes, you said 4 to 8 minutes, okay? That's even more so. This policy initially came, and Mr. Shinsky, you stated we're not talking about EMS, but this policy initially initiated with EMS, didn't it?
Absolutely. The EMS has been prioritizing runs since about 1972.
Mm-hmm. And how long has the fire department been in, sir?
1972.
No, the fire department has not been in since 1972. How long has the fire department?
I'm not understanding your question, sir.
How long has the fire department been in existence?
Oh, in existence, 1860.
Okay, so if a fire is coming out, and as again, Member Ayers has stated, we have police, we have fire, and we have EMS is not an emergency. But we know that there are calls a lot of times with EMS that comes that may not necessarily be an EMS-related issue or prioritized issue. But we're having this, but this initially came from a policy with EMS. Am I correct on that? It started with EMS?
Like I said, EMS has been prioritizing runs since 1972. That's all I can tell you about that.
Okay, but the policy that you're putting in, did this not start with EMS, or was this originated with EMS? Mr. Hill?
Through the chair, this did not start through EMS.
What did it start with, sir?
This is a research that we've done as a team, and we found best practices across the country,
Okay,
and we use those best practices to implement this policy for fire.
okay. Because the research that I did, I read something that this initially started with EMS and it carried over to our Detroit Fire Department. So, okay, I'll be corrected on that.
Mr. McAllister.
Thank you.
For a
Miss-
time check, we have 35
I
additional
understand.
agenda items to get to, and one more discussion.
Okay. What is the percentage rates, if anyone can tell me, of accidents involving lights and sirens? What is the
Through the
percentage
chair.
for Detroit? I'll just go with Detroit. What is the percentage rate of, or how many runs have come out where there has been accidents as opposed to accidents that does not use lights and sirens? How many?
We had 17 accidents last year in 2017.
That had lights and
Involving,
sirens?
yes, sir.
17?
Yes, sir.
And do you not think that there might be more if you do not have lights and sirens, where people see this, recognize this, they know about this?
And we think there'll be less.
You think there'll be less?
That's right.
You're not sure, though?
I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure there's going to be less.
You're sure it's going to be less?
I'm pretty sure there's going to be less.
Okay.
Through the chair,
Yes, sir.
we will study that. That's the policy has changed. We're going to examine everything that happens from here forward, and in a year from now, we'll have the answer to that.
That's right. That is the goal. It's through the
Okay.
chair, sorry.
Okay, thank you so much. My only concern is, how many people are going to be injured while your study is going on? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Member Ayers?
Thank you.
Member Ayers, just please recognize we got 35.
I recognize that, but I also recognize we have a whole city of people that deserve to have an explanation on why this policy is like this. So I appreciate that, Mr. Chair, and I'll get to it as quickly as I can. So I don't have, my questions are, you know how. So let's clear up one thing. When we talk about Officer Torcos, that was a drunk driver that hit his car, hit that fire engine that was doing over 100 miles an hour. So let's make sure that that part is clear, what we use as an example. You all said that you've been studying this for a year, yet we don't have a cost-benefit analysis, we don't have a risk assessment, we don't have anything that are statistics for the city of Detroit that substantiates anything. So I don't know what you were studying in the year in order to bring this here, and Shinsky, for you to say, well, I think it'll be less. If you've actually been studying it for a year, then you should be able to have some quantifying numbers and qualifying numbers that substantiate the policy change. So that's not here. The quote that you all used, that was also from 4 years ago. So things change in 24-hour periods. Just like fires build in seconds, things change in seconds. And so to use a quote from 2014, I would have liked to see something from, 2017, 16. So that's that. Have we done a study on not treating emergencies like emergencies and what that looks like? Have we identified what things look like? We're saying that we're dispatching them as a 1 and 2, and that's understandable. I get it, but you're using dispatch to assess whether something is a 1 or 2, and quite honestly, that's a heavy burden to put on a person that makes about $12 an hour, for them to assess whether something is 1 or 2. And I'm going to tell you like this. I live in Detroit. I don't know where y'all live at, but I live in the city of Detroit. And when I call 911, it's because whatever is happening is an emergency for me. And I expect to see lights and sirens because it is an emergency. And so if I'm driving down Myers and I call 911 because I saw some wires fall, that's one thing. So the dispatcher may take it and say, hey, all right, this is a priority too because wires fell. Okay. But if I'm calling in from from Appeline, and I see it completely different because now my eye is on it and the wires fell. But what the person on Myers didn't get to tell you about the situation was that the wires fell in a backyard with a bunch of kids, but it's dispatch priority 2. And I'm going to tell you, if it's my kids in the backyard and you're not coming with lights and sirens, I got a serious problem. And now you're going to fill Member McAllister's committee with a bunch of lawsuits. Are there municipalities that you studied, are they also doing MFR runs? So we haven't had that. You said there's 17 accidents that occurred. 17. Does that warrant a policy change? 17, we ain't even cleared 30. You haven't cleared 40. You said 17. That's not even 20. So does it warrant something like this where it seems to be that the neighborhood is not important? And that's the thing, and you guys know, y'all know, that that is the trending theme right now because the city is under such a change. You come downtown, you see lights and sirens. So now we're not dispatching people with lights and sirens based on a dispatcher, not a trained professional that has done the job, getting there, putting eyes on the situation to assess it. How does that look? Now it makes it feel like we don't care. And that's what I want to prevent. You know, we don't have any Detroit statistics. So what I'm saying to you is I recognize that you have to do policy changes. I recognize that. And I understand that you have to do what's best for the department. But I want us to look at it all the way around because I know I live in the city of Detroit and I know what I'm expecting to see and I know what our people are expecting to see. And I just think that calling a spade, y'all know just like I do in any one of these professions, whether it's at this table or otherwise, you have people that come to work just to get a check. And there are a lot of people that come in the department to get a check. And so now you substantiated a reason for them to take their time. Because they don't live here, they don't care about here. You've substantiated by putting a policy in place. And those are the things that I have a fundamental issue with when it comes to policy changes like this. So I'm not expecting an answer on any of that because you don't have what I'm looking for. You've made it very clear that you have not done the proper research. But I don't want to continue on supporting anything that helps to create and further the narrative that there is a divide, because it's just not. Because at the end of the day, I was elected to represent the over 600,000 people that cover this 139 square mile city. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
So through the chair,
I don't want a response.
through the chair, I want to say clearly that we are still using lights and sirens. If there's a building fire, we use lights and sirens. If there is an accident where a person is trapped in a vehicle, we use lights and sirens. 2015, 94 accidents, vehicle and personnel costs, $766,000. 2016, 58 accidents, vehicle and personnel costs, $772,000. These do not include the legal fees associated with these accidents. We care as an administration about the safety of our citizens and our firefighters. And if we can reduce an accident or the possibility of a fatality by one, that's all that matters. We have to get better. We've made some mistakes in the execution of the policy, but the substance is for the citizens of Detroit and for our firefighters. Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair,
So,
I'm sorry, real quick.
Member Ayers?
I appreciate that you got those numbers for me, Eric. I do. But I would like to see that in the actual cost-benefit analysis as well as a risk assessment, and I would like them to be germane to the city of Detroit. And I'm going to ask a question of the four of you sitting at the end of the table representing the administration for Detroit firefighters. How many of you live in the city of Detroit? I do. Scott does. Roy does. And so what I'm telling you is, I understand that safety is everybody's number one concern, because we wouldn't have you all in the positions that you're in, and you wouldn't have served the city for well over 30 years or more collectively. And so we appreciate that. But I'm telling you, as a person that lives in this city, what it feels like when you come downtown and you see something. You can't tell me about turning on lights for a building fire. Of course, we're not stupid. We know you're going to turn on lights for a building fire. But if you don't have trained eyes on the scene and you're leaving it up to a dispatcher to determine whether something is 1 or 2, anything can happen. And that's what I'm trying to get to you. And the problem, the nexus of this, is that we didn't have to have this conversation here. It should have started and shouldn't have been circumvented through a joint health and safety committee. And so you have the right to live where you want to live, but as a Detroiter and a taxpayer that pays my salary, y'all's salary, and everybody else, we need to really assess this. And when we talk about 17 accidents, I don't know that it warrants a policy change. And it's just that simple. So we can have more conversation outside of here because, again, I didn't want it to be here. But the fact of the matter still remains, as I continue to say, not just to you, but to several other department heads, have conversations with the entities that are set up in your department. They're there for a reason. They didn't fall out the sky. They're there because it works, and it worked before you, and it worked after you. Have conversation there, effective conversation, so that we don't have to have this conversation here. It's just that simple. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Ayers. So, question. So I understand at the leadership level, you need to be able to make macro level decisions. And so something that Member Ayers discussed was the communication on how this gets carried out. So the impression, and often the impression is hugely important, is how do we change the narrative that we're now minimizing the importance of runs? And so this is education for me. Code 1 versus Code 2. What is the difference here?
Code 1 would be an immediate threat to life or property. Code 2 would be a non-life-threatening situation, or we believe that we should not respond lights and sirens, disregarding traffic signals, going left of center, and exceeding the speed limit. This policy is not designed with the sole purpose to reduce accidents. That is one of the factors in the policy, but the goal and substance of the policy is to save lives and to make sure that our firefighters arrive safely to mitigate any potential emergency.
Is there a difference in the required response time or recommended response time between a Code 1 and a Code 2?
So yes, because the Code 1s are typically are life-threatening medical calls, are life-threatening fire calls. So as we discussed earlier with Member McAllister, the NFPA has recommended guidelines as to the time limits and parameters when you should arrive for these different categories of calls, and we measure those.
So what are those? What is the recommended or required response time for a Code 1, and then what is that same response time for a Code 2?
So, through the chair, a Code 1 response is for, like the commissioner said, you have the 4-minute response from the time that they're dispatched to get to the scene, for the first engine to get to the scene.
You have how long?
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay.
Okay. And then, as he was saying, also you have the whole entire complement to get there in 8 minutes for a Code 1 response. Now, the Code 2 response, and we're talking about fire relief companies. Like if you're going to relieve a fire company that's already on a scene, we're telling them to go to that scene, just normal traffic, so that way you don't have to go there lights and sirens. That's what we're telling them. Some of the other examples, are, Chief, you have the policy right here?
So then, is there no recommended response time for Code 2?
No, sir.
Okay. You were going to...
Through the chair, sir, I can read. I have the policy in front of me. I can read the Code 1 and Code 2 response to you.
The executive version, please.
No, they're very brief.
Okay.
Code 1 response: an incident which indicates an urgent and/or life-threatening emergency. The response shall include the use of both lights and sirens in accordance with Public Act 300 of 1949. An emergency response is only authorized in conjunction with an emergency incident, and warning lights must be on with sirens sounding to warn drivers of surrounding vehicles of your presence, unless otherwise noted in this policy. That's Code 1. Code 2 response: an incident or service call which indicates immediate attention is needed, but responding vehicles shall not use lights or sirens. The responding units will comply with all state and local traffic laws. Code 2 responses also applies to the order when instituted to go easy by the first arriving company.
All right, so this is the new policy that's been implemented?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that changed, the old policy was what before?
Lights and sirens for everything.
Okay, so code 1, lights and sirens, code 2, lights and sirens. What percentage of our calls are code 1?
Through the chair, no lights and sirens for code 2.
So there was never a lights and
No,
sirens?
no.
No, in the new, I'm sorry.
Through the chair, sir. Through the old policy, we did not have code 1 and code 2.
Okay.
We responded to everything lights and sirens.
So the new policy now implements the different coding levels?
Correct.
All right, and then since we've just implemented this, do we have a estimate on what percentage of our calls are going to be lights and siren, code 1 versus code 2?
Yes, sir.
About 50%.
Through the chair. It
Sorry.
is about 50%.
Each is about 50%. So now comes in the impression and the perception of what this will do. So, and remember, this is a very good point. If you leave that up to somebody else to identify which one, so are there very clear guidelines on what is a code 1 versus a code 2? And how do we ensure that that gray line is a hard black and white line? We know when and when not to do that.
Through the chair, dispatch has always prioritized runs, made judgments. They have to determine what response is appropriate and how many resources to tend to every incident. So they have to take the information that they have and do the best work that they possibly can. They are human, though, and mistakes are made, but there are guidelines as to what should be sent as a code 1 and what should be sent as a code 2. So anything involving investigation of smoke or the structure is a code 1. Any report of fire is a code 1. And I will say to you also that while the dispatchers use discretion, if there's doubt, they should use the code 1. They should err on the side of the emergent response as opposed to the code 2.
Mr. Chairman, can I add something?
Yes.
So when the chief says that central office is always prioritized, what he means is, based on the information they get, they have to decide whether they should send a box alarm or a still alarm. I'm breaking this down as simple as terms I can. Box alarm or still alarm. Box alarm, we're sending the cavalry. Still alarm, we're going to send one company, they're going to check this out, and they're going to decide if we need the cavalry. That's what the chief means when he says they've always prioritized. And we have. And it's always went both ways. Still alarm would show up. Holy cow, send the cavalry. We got a fire here. And now everybody's got to come screaming in. It's also went the other way. Central dispatches a box alarm. They send the cavalry. They get there. Nothing. False alarm. So that's something that's always.
Okay. 1 second, Member Counselor. You have something to add?
I just wanted to add that the chief is absolutely right. We do have them broke down. The dispatchers can clearly see what is a code 1 and what is a code 2.
Okay, and you have these broken down how? I mean, is there a list? Is there
is a
a
current
quick
list.
response card that they have? I mean, how do they know?
They have a list, and
Okay.
it's put in front of them as dispatchers. They know which ones fall into
Okay.
code 1 and code 2.
And so for me, having done 28 years of first responder service, the old adage in the Coast Guard was, you have to go out, but you don't have to come back. Meaning that it was your job to go out to save the life, but if you weren't able to save your own, that's oh well. But we learned, though, throughout the years that we were investing in our people and our equipment, and if you went out and didn't come back, now you may have lost 2 or 3 lives when there may have been 1. And so I understand that, but the sea change in the philosophy, that's huge. And if you're not able to communicate that to those who are boots on the ground responding, it may send the signal that we no longer care as much about the people and the citizens that we're here to actually protect and then go bring back alive. So therein lies the issue with communication and why communication of policies is so very, very important. And so what I want to do before we finish up here today is line item in 90 days. I want to have a report back on how this new policy implementation has been handled. What are our metrics, successes, failures? What are we doing to correct those? And so that'll be before we end this today. But we need to make sure that when you have this is a significant policy change. It may seem simple, but when your entire career, your father's career, maybe even your grandfather's career has been put up on every run goes lights and sirens, and then you change it to now maybe half those runs go lights and sirens, it sounds as if you're minimizing the lives of the citizens of Detroit, which you're saying you are not doing, and I believe that you're not doing that, but a policy change needs to be communicated. I don't think that was done very well today. to this point. Member McAllister?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to be long. Just two questions. Gentlemen, it has been stated that you've used immediate 2 times, immediate threat, immediate attention. Can you one, distinguish between the two? I mean, if it's something that's immediate attention, to me it might be a threat as well, especially when you're talking about that. My other question is that during October, when we have Angels Night, how are you going to classify code 1s and code 2s from that point? Because you know that's our biggest time when the fire department is utilized a lot. So how do you distinguish that? And then 3, how do we change the mindset of our citizens in the city of Detroit? Look at, if an emergency vehicle is coming through, it is coming through with lights and sirens. And when you talk about, going back to my first one, immediate threat or immediate attention, you know, how do we get our citizens in the mindset, okay, now we have these 2 codes, so that if something happens, because they're going to come back and they're going to say, I didn't hear any sirens, I didn't hear any, see any lights. So again, we got to look at the mindset of the people in the city of Detroit. So if you could answer 1 and 2 for me, and 3.
To the chair, sir. So the Code 1 response indicates an urgent and or life-threatening emergency.
Does it mean immediate 2? I'm sorry.
So yes, there would be an immediate response to that, and that response would require lights and sirens. So the Code 2 policy speaks to immediate attention, which is emphasizing that we're not telling you to take your time. We're not telling you this isn't important. We're telling you this is important. We just want you to respond without lights and sirens.
Member McAllister, anything else?
No, he has the other 2, Mr. Chair. How are you going to differentiate between when we have Angels Night, Code 1 and Code 2, or will there be a difference?
There will be no difference. The policy will carry on.
Which one, sir?
The new policy, Code 1 and Code 2, we will continue to use those coded responses throughout that time period. And as to your question about the lights and sirens, the citizens will experience it. It'll be no different than if the fire truck was out on the scene, out on the street running an errand. They are going to be a part of traffic, and they will be driving with traffic. They will be observing traffic laws, and there should be no issue with the citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'll do is I'll send some questions and responses to save time, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So this time, looking for a motion to request from the fire department a report that indicates the parameters and criteria between dispatching Code 1 versus Code 2. Please provide that in a written. I'll provide a memo to that.
Mr. Chair, is that the one you're saying for 90 days?
No. This is a motion to bring that information now. That's a immediate request.
So moved.
Without objection, that request will be made to the administration, and we're going to line item a January discussion with the fire department leadership to give us measurements around this new policy being implemented, where we are, what happened, proud, sorry, all that good stuff.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.